And at the same time, many people start martial arts, as you said in the beginning of this podcast, because they either were bullied, they feel insecure, they want to become more confident, they want to learn how to defend themselves. So they are already vulnerable. And often
Mhm.
they also want to belong to something. And that's why it's so easy. I mean, I know some stories of women, they were in a female safe house because they came out of an abusive relationship, and people were like, yeah, you should learn how to defend yourself, go to a martial arts. So okay, so they went to a jiu-jitsu school, and the coach was like, okay, let me help you, helped moving, all that, and groomed them then in having a toxic relationship with them where there was also abuse. So basically they just stepped from one abusive relationship into another. Thank you so much, Fawn, that we can be here. So I'm Laurien.
I'm Alex. Hi.
And we opened our own school in Munich after we left a cult gym because of sexual harassment and a bunch of other things. And because we realized there needs to be a safe space, which doesn't mean that you don't train hard. We train all very hard, but we train hard in a safe space so that everyone can train hard. And during COVID, we kind of gained members because of our trauma informed approach, and more black belts were asking, what is your secret? What are you doing? And that's how we, in short, decided to, well, go online and offer off the zone and teach other martial arts coaches or schools in total how to become trauma informed themselves.
So is Off the Zone the name of your school, or is it the name of your program?
Off the zone is kind of like a side business because our school is called Team Laurien and Alex because we're a team, and yeah, we need more than two. We're kind of like the head
Mhm.
coaches, but it is all the people that train with us that makes the team. Later, I think we can also dive in why we never say that it's like a family. We will. I
Mhm.
think we can dive into that also because it's relevant for today's topic, but why we say it's a team. And off the zone, we call this because we go a little bit out of the zone. We go out of these kind of hierarchies and principles, and we want to challenge outdated industry norms. And that's where Off the Zone, the name, came from. And the program is called the Thrive Drive method.
Oh, you said the 5 Thrive?
Thrive Drive method.
The drive to thrive.
Yeah.
Drive to Thrive. Okay, got it. Yes. Great. And then Alex, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm a martial artist since I'm a little kid. I got a yellow belt in judo when I was 7. Ever since trained martial arts, I did a lot of more traditional budo sports, and at one point realized that the application was missing. The actual sparring and then stuff was missing, and that's how I got into BJJ, where I met Laurien. We met as white belts on the BJJ mats, started dating, and yeah, also the BJJ led then to kickboxing, Thai boxing, MMA, and yeah, we're both purple belts under Kadu Francis in San Diego Jiu Jitsu Foundation. Yeah, that's in
Well,
short.
we'll have to do another podcast on jujitsu and dating. It seems like you guys did it right, though.
Well, we were like both white belts, so like there was no power imbalance. And the
Mhm.
reason we were paired up all the time was because I'm tiny, I don't weigh anything, and often was the only woman. But he was, with his 80 kilos, was like the lightest, which is why we got paired up a lot. So very classic, unoriginal.
But still, it sounds like a beautiful story, and you guys are here creating something great for the community. I want to talk a little bit more about your experiences. You said that you came from a cult-like gym situation, and that's why you wanted to create Off the Zone. Is there anything from your experience that you are willing to share with our audience so they're aware and they can stay out of those situations?
Yeah, I think sometimes you will find yourself in a situation like that because it takes a while to recognize it. And like in my case, I mean, Alex can speak for himself later, was that when I came, there was like this love bombing. The coach was super nice to me, and he seemed to be nice to everyone, so I thought that was normal. And quite quickly, I had good connections with people. I enjoyed myself there, and they actually also helped me coming from sexual assault as a minor. It actually helped me heal with my traumas, because when I started jiu-jitsu, I had flashbacks on the mats and all that, and they did not know, but they helped me kind of get through that. So clearly, there were also many positive things. So you also get attached to such a place, so much so that when you notice behaviors that are not okay, you start to kind of overlook them, or just like turn a blind eye to them, because the rest at that point feels so great. And
Mhm.
that is what makes it so tricky, because you want to belong. Therefore, you just literally silence this voice inside of you that is kind of telling you like, this is not okay.
Yeah, and there's also always this, but he teaches such great jiu-jitsu that it's the best jiu-jitsu we can get in the area, whether that's true or not. But you're led to believe that, and
That was the narrative that was told. Yeah.
yeah, so it's very
Mhm.
hard to be like it's this, yeah, it's not, you put down the bad experiences and are like, yeah, but it's for the jiu-jitsu. So, and I can navigate around the other things. So very like how I realized something was wrong was basically when I came to that school as a white belt. I already had a black belt in traditional jiu-jitsu. So I learned very quick, and I got a lot of attention, positive attention from the coach, and he wanted me to compete. And I felt like because I was learning quick, I got positive attention and was good. Didn't feel weird or anything. But then when we started dating, from one day to another, uh, I didn't get positive attention anymore. I got shouted at. I got really like we greeted each other with a kiss, like other couples also did.
Mhm.
When we met in the school, and then he came, you can't do that in here.
Like, we're not making out. Yeah, it was
Yeah, it
just
was
like
just
saying
like,
hello because we met in the gym. It was not
yeah.
in the
Mhm.
middle of the net either. Like, it wasn't some sort of Hollywood
Or
romance.
once I put my arm around her for the group photo, and he shot towards me, his face like that much from mine, and was like, hands on your belt, hands on your belt. And I was completely confused with what was going on. I had no clue until
I then felt the need to tell him. So after 3 months or so,
Mhm.
he started to hit on me. So the thing was, I
Mhm.
had a little bit of a massage practice before, and some people just come because jiu-jitsu people, they have always knots in their shoulders, their necks, their backs,
Mhm.
like there's always something. And people came over, men and women, and so I also, for me, it was never I mean, people come over, like I didn't. So he heard this, and he kind of invited himself on a Sunday, and was like, have you anything to do? Do you, I have these knots, can you massage me? And I was like, yeah, I could do, but he wanted specifically that Sunday, and I didn't necessarily want that, but I also had nothing planned. So, okay. So he came, and then started that. When he entered my home, he immediately took off his shirt, which I already found weird, and I
Mhm.
already had these red flags. But I was thinking, silly me, I was thinking like, yeah, but the black belt would never care for a white belt. But I was kind of thinking like, why am I even thinking in this higher? I mean, if I would meet him on the road, I mean, I'm studying my PhD. Like, I mean, like there are different balance. Like, what does it mean? Like in academia, I may be his senior, right? Like, what does it even mean? But that was what I was
Mhm.
thinking, and I ignored it, massaged, and then when we're done, he didn't want to go. He didn't want to leave. He's like, "Oh, let's watch the new Game of Thrones episode," and I was kind of like hesitant, but okay. And as we were watching, then on the couch, he started kissing me. Then I stopped him. I kicked him out of my house. I said, "I have something to do," so I kicked him out of my house.
Mhm.
I was super scared that I did that, because he is a big guy, and if he wants something from me, like even if I would be even female black belt, I would have a big problem. And I also was thinking, like, I was panicking because I finally thought that I found a good place where I literally enjoy myself training. What is
Mhm.
this? Am I now going to be kicked out? Like all these thoughts, like all these things and emotions went through my mind, because it took a while for me to find a place where I felt actually comfortable. at least up till that moment. So on Monday I came, and I also got shouted at that a female training partner asked me like, "What's going on?"
Mhm.
And then I told her. So as he was teaching, we left and went into the locker room. And then she got mad because apparently, as he was walking away from my apartment, he wrote her asking whether she was available.
Mm.
So, and that's kind of like how we uncovered more and more of these behaviors. And because I always said no, he was hunting me. So, for instance, he was in my home. I have a specific IKEA bed, like a high bed that I sleep high, and below is then the couch because it was like a tiny room. And then
Mhm.
he was from IKEA, and then he was in IKEA and saw that bad, so he made a picture and sent it to me. Like he would say, "Oh, even though he had all time an official girlfriend, um, he was saying like, yeah, I'm going on a tour in Portugal and for Germany, but I wanted to join, but I want to go to dinner, like all these things." He even tried to say like, "Oh, we have a team dinner. Are you coming?" And I was like, nobody talked about that. So I asked
Mhm.
other students, and they were like, no, nothing is planned. So obviously I didn't go. But he tried to isolate me. And the more he realized that Alex and I were dating and coming together, the more relentless he got.
Mm.
So to the point that Alex really got negative experience and was just treated very negatively, that I then felt the need to tell him about it. But it was crazy because I somehow felt ashamed, even though I have nothing to be ashamed about, because I didn't do anything. I just said no, and that no was not accepted.
Mm.
So that's like
Yeah.
short version of events.
That's unfortunate because I have to say that that's not an experience that I have had, but it's not an unheard experience for me. And that's the sad part about it. Um, like I said, you guys kind of did dating right. And I know dating in the jujitsu gym can be kind of taboo. But when you have that difference in power dynamic, especially in the classroom setting, it can be weird. And it's unfortunate that people find it ways to abuse their power in that way. I'm sorry you went through that. That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, and since we were also, when we got our blue belt, we started training jiu-jitsu too. So he was still teaching another club where the traditional jiu-jitsu was.
Yeah, I had a very strong kids group and youth group,
Mhm.
and they were doing well, and they got also more and more interested in jiu-jitsu. And of course, I also taught more and more jiu-jitsu to them because yeah, just with the application, the sparring, it's much more fun also for the kids. They got much more engaged, and they learned much quicker. So yeah, it was fun.
So we started teaching that, and of course, then our current head coach, he was then of course responsible for the graduation also of these kids and youth. And we had many girls, and I just realized that, I mean, they were all still minors, and I just felt uncomfortable. I was like, I just felt like it's wrong of me to bring them to him,
Mhm.
knowing what I
Yeah.
know. Not saying that he would molest minors necessarily, but just the fact that I know it's not a safe space, and that did it basically for us. That we were like, no, I know we're only blue belts, but there needs to be a safe space. I cannot, with good conscience, do this. So that's when we opened our own school, left, and found. Then our current head coach, who understood our story, believes in us, and since then all good.
This what your story that you're talking about, and also kind of the way that we got connected, which is through Jasmine Walt's story, that she was going through some situations with her team, and she has since left that environment, which was toxic for her. That these experiences have been the reason why I wanted to reach out to you. I think about a year or two ago, I had to get off of Instagram because of the stories coming out of, I think, sports,
Mhm. Yeah, fight sports.
fight sports in
Suicide.
Florida, South Florida. Yes, exactly. And it was so traumatizing for me because I've been, I was somebody who experienced my roommate basically having sex with me when I was passed out in my bed. And hearing some of those stories, it triggered me so badly. And the fact that they were children was just awful, and being groomed through that system. Not saying that that's something that your previous coach would do, but just knowing that experience that he was doing with the adult women and having young girls or young people being groomed into thinking that the behavior is okay. I'm really glad that you guys left, and I know that a lot of people in your situation struggle to make that decision because of what you guys said previously, talking about, well, I know this instructor is really good at what they do, and so they kind of allow themselves to overlook these other red flags. And so that's really what we're here to talk about, is how can we identify these red flags, and what steps that do we need to take in order to make a conscious decision to be in alignment with who we actually want to be as martial artists, as people in this world. And I know you have a background. You said you have a PhD, Laurien.
I didn't finish it, but I did publish like that what I did, because, well, Jiu Jitsu, I kind of pulled the dinner in that sense, that I was like, this is so much more fun. But I transformed, so to speak, my PhD, because it was about pain behavior. So a lot of neurobiology and trauma and all that in there, even though it is coming from an historical and anthropological perspective. So I would say that my PhD is now kind of alive. It's like what I do now with the martial arts world, with Off the Zone. And there I feel I can reach many more people than, I don't know, a handful of people that would write my dissertation. So I think moving forward, I think it's very interesting to learn what actually happens in our brain when you are in a cult, when you're long in a cult, why it's so hard to realize you're in one, and why it's so hard to leave. I think it's very important to establish this also first, because if a listener is in there and they feel like, oh my God, what should I do? Like, also give yourself there some grace, because it's super hard. So to keep it very simple, usually our brain's kind of seen as like a left and a right side, of which the right side is typically more responsible for emotions, and the left is more logical. So that's where language is processed. So usually you have this horizontal integration. So when you feel something, then it goes to the other side, where you can express this usually in words or writing, or you can express it in some sort of way. Now, when you're in a cult, that integration gets disconnected. So you feel something. So say you see something that isn't right, or you think something like, okay, this is actually a coach is shouting something really very like, hey, calmness, professionality is a thing. And normally you would indeed just go to that expression. You may say something like, hey, it's not so bad, or you express it in some sort of way how you feel. Now, there's also a second integration. That's a vertical one. And that is really the integration where thoughts are processed, reasoning, critical thinking, this. So once you feel your emotions, something happens that doesn't sit well with you, you can express it in a way like, hey, that you realize in yourself, it doesn't sit well with me. Then it goes vertical, where you are like critically thinking like, hey, but is this actually acceptable? Should we not challenge this behavior in this setting? And also that vertical connection also gets kind of disconnected. So when you are long enough in a cult and you're not in touch with your feelings anymore, so you cannot express it. And because of that, you cannot get in touch with your reasoning, also with your judgments and your thought processes, then basically you cannot challenge their authority anymore, because you're conditioned not to. And that's like, of course, a step-by-step process, because like I say, every school, also toxic school, not everything is bad. The instruction can be great, your training partners can be great, and maybe even these coach did something really important for you. Maybe they also really helped you once really on your path when you were struggling. This is all possible. Like, that's why it's so complex, because if it would be so black and white, it would be easy to be like, oh, it's a cult, I go. But since it's so blurry, that's what makes it so hard to leave, because of all these connections. Now, this is what happens in the brain. Then what's also important that we should realize in a cult type or toxic type of environment is that in a healthy environment, different opinions that don't mix, they can coexist. we like it when people have maybe different styles, different thoughts, different opinions. And that's okay, because we don't believe that that necessarily is threatening to us or to anyone else. But usually in a cult type of an environment, they believe there's only one way, one narrative, one history, one story. So when you do challenge, that's when you get punished, isolated, gossiped about. There are many options there. And so you also are conditioned that maybe you started out kind of questioning or saying like, hey coach, I think this was not okay. And when you get like punished for it, step by step, you'll become quiet, especially when you still believe that this is the best team in this environment, or this is the best coach there is, whether it's true or not, but that's then maybe what you believe. So step by step, you start to like bite your tongue, these integrations become disconnected, and that's how you get deeper and deeper in it, and you become kind of like a willing executioner, that you're an enabler without necessarily that you want to, but you just can't, you're not in touch with yourself anymore. It's about some sort of greater good in this time, in this sense, not greater good, but for the cult leader.
How do people would you say these cult leaders, do they identify people that are easier for them to manipulate in this way? Or in your studies, is there like a breaking down process in order to get to this place?
So in our latest podcast with Emily Mick, we talk about why people with narcissistic traits tend to be cult leaders. So usually when you have positions of power, they definitely somehow attract people with narcissistic traits. That is one thing. And at the same time, many people start martial arts, as you said in the beginning of this podcast, because they either were bullied, they feel insecure, they want to become more confident, they want to learn how to defend themselves. So they are already vulnerable. And often they also want to belong to something. And that's why it's so easy. I mean, I know some stories of women, they were in a female safe house because they came out of an abusive relationship, and people were like, yeah, you should learn how to defend yourself, go to a martial arts. So okay, so they went to a Jiu Jitsu school, and they informed the coach also that they were in the safe house, and that's the reason why they're there. And the coach was like, okay, let me help you, helped moving, all that, and groomed them then in having a toxic relationship with them, where there was also abuse. So basically they just stepped from one abusive relationship into another. And it's just simply because, and all they want, literally all they come for, is to learn jiu-jitsu, is to become a better version of themselves. That's really all that they want. But that's just what gets abused, and unfortunately that's a very common narrative.
Those things really, it's not just sad. I was going to say that's so sad, but really they infuriate me, because both, I know all three of our backgrounds, we want to be in a place. This is why we do martial arts, in order to empower others. And we want other women, especially me. I'm trying to gather more women in the sport, not just for representation purposes, but because I know how helpful and how powerful it is for confidence to actually be armed with the ability to protect yourself against potential other abusive like situations. And yet here we are stepping into a place where somebody's completely taking advantage of that. And that just infuriates me. This is why I wanted you guys on the podcast. Alex, do you have any thoughts so far? I know you've been kind of quiet.
Well, I agree, and Laurien can usually
Yes.
express it way better, but I think we can go back to the original question. How do you recognize that you're in a cult, and how do you get out? And usually when you have these feelings, something doesn't sit right, something is off, don't necessarily throw them out, don't disregard them. Maybe you have friends outside that bubble, that jiu-jitsu scene in this case, and talk with them about it, because usually when it doesn't sit right with you, and you get very strong reactions from some friends that don't care about jiu-jitsu or whether you do jiu-jitsu, and they're like, and you accept that that's normal for you, then you can get this vertical integration back, where you can start a critical thinking process and can examine whether it's right for you or not, whether just because this person has a black belt and can give you nice tape stripes on your belt, whether that's worth for you to be shouted at, for example, or be put down, or whether those rules actually all make sense.
Yeah, and I also think like gossiping is a thing. Like I know that that coach would say things to me about other students, and I was just sitting there. I didn't ask for anything, and I was also thinking like probably you will also gossip about me and about you. And I think when you realize that there's somehow, I mean, people talk. That's not the thing. But when you just, we have in Germany, there's this saying, "Fish stinkt from Kopf," and that means that the fish stings from the head, which means that when a culture is like toxic, it comes from top. Because even if it's a great person, but if they do not nip negative stuff in the butt, even when it comes from their assistant coaches or others, then it's they are the boss, they are responsible, and they should all be held accountable. And when you realize these kind of things, something ain't right.
Yeah, one critical thing is also when there's only one truth, one God. Like when
no cross training.
No cross training is a big one. So often it's also not directly discouraged or disallowed anymore. You're not allowed to cross train, but then the school you visited or you want to visit is put down, or we went to a Kid Dale seminar, for example, back in the day. And back then, Kid Dale, I think, was placed second in the world. So he was successful on the highest level. And the coach didn't like that we went to that seminar. And when we afterwards, he asked us how was the seminar, and we were like, it was great, it was fun, we learned a lot. He's like, yeah, he's popular, but no good jiu-jitsu. And it's like, wait a minute. He's still adult division, performing well. So these kind of things you should think about. Why can't someone else's jiu-jitsu not be also great? Why can there only be one way to perform a certain technique? Why can other details not also work? Maybe sometimes it's also a style thing. You only are allowed to play this certain style, and this new stuff, like, I don't know, back then it was Berenbodo, doesn't work. That's just
Few hooks, even like my brother started like in the Netherlands really early with the leg lock game when it started to become like a hype. So we were also like learning. He taught us some over on holiday, and then during an open mat we were just practicing then this heel hook setup and stuff. And the coach was immediately like, "They're dangerous, don't do them, you cannot," like making a very big deal out of it. Where I was like, practicing something, right? It's an open mat. We can basically do what we want. Like we were just doing together. We're not bothering anybody else. I think when creativity and curiosity to also go out of, because every school has just a few things where they are super good at and things that where they're not less good at, or every school has some specialities. And I think that's the nice thing about cross training. You can just find your own style because you get so much input. And when you have a school that is kind of like, no, it's like our school, our secret, so to speak, I think that's a big flag.
I had wanted to mention earlier when you're talking about visiting another gym, I had a very similar experience. And, I kind of don't want to put out the gym's name, but I'll just say I remember being a part of a gym for a period of time. And then I had to leave because, just having to work in different location, it didn't make sense to train at that gym anymore. So I left, and they were kind of like sister gyms at that time. if you would
Mhm.
say.
Mhm.
I ended up leaving that gym, and I saw there was going to be this big women's seminar happening with one of the predominant females out there, Christina Barlan. She's a Bay Area native. We miss her out here, but she would do these really amazing female events, and she would get all the ladies from the Bay Area to come and participate. And I invited some of the girls from my former gym to go train there. And I remember after that event happened, I went to go visit because I would go back to visit when I could, and I got kicked out. I got kicked out for inviting women to an all women's event. And it was something that just kind of shook me, like you just got out of a cold pool. And I was so shocked that I was shocked, but I wasn't shocked because I had
Mhm.
those other red flags prior, right? And it was definitely experience that made me really choose where I train very wisely. And I think it makes me, there might be places that I like, but it's very difficult, especially difficult now because our gym closed down due to COVID. So now I'm just like, black belt now. So I was like, I'll just train wherever, I just train any place that I can. But now I'm almost to the point where I'm resistant to be like, hey, I'm part of this gym now because I want to be able to have the opportunity to train everywhere. And that toxic mentality really holds people back.
It does, and I find it shows also so the insecurity, because in the end, when you get students that travel, they bring all kinds of new knowledge and expertise back, everybody benefits from that. And I
Exactly.
mean, like we also as coaches, I mean, look, even in kids classes when we just play games, they figure out things. I'm like, wow, I did not think of that. That's really good. Like I learn from the little ones. I learn from when we have people that went on holiday or for work, they went somewhere and they just brought their gear and they learn some cool details here and there. Like everybody benefits. And I think collaboration is, I think, the way forward, because nobody can know it all. Nobody can be.
Exactly.
And if we really,
especially at this time where jiu-jitsu is really developing really really fast.
yeah,
There's all the time there's new stuff coming up and new ideas, new concepts, new techniques. So when you want to keep growing, you need to look out what's happening, and yeah, the quickest way is to cross train.
yeah,
Mhm.
to collaborate. And I think, and another thing I think also is like when you start noticing like specific red flags that you're like, that's odd, like, just with one you don't need to immediately pack your bags, but I think it's good to make this note and just maybe see whether other people experience similar things, like just see like what's going on. And I think one thing that's very important also to highlight is that when you identify that you are in a cult, um it is like leaving a toxic relationship. It may take a few times before you finally cut ties.
And
And
there probably is a grieving process after it too, because
yes,
you have a lot of bonds there.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
yeah,
it can also be quite awkward or challenging when later on,
you go to tournament.
when you go for a tournament, for example, you might meet them, and also you might get backlash. You might, especially when you do well, or other people of your gym do well, maybe you're successful without the cult you were in. You might be shouted at, you might be belittled, you might be
I think it's more like bullied in terms of that gossiping. Like we got,
yeah.
especially the
Mhm.
first tournament,
With us, it was
it
gossiping.
was gossiping, like bullying. They kind of like they were like making fun of us, whatever. When it was like a tournament, I mean, now they don't, because of course also off the zone, all that. I think they don't like that so very much. But what's also important is that when you leave, either you found your own school or you just go training somewhere else. If you become successful, that is for them cause to gossip or to bully or to exhibit other negative behaviors, because to their mind you're a traitor and they are the number one. They don't understand that you can have many number ones at the same time.
Mhm.
So like there is like this thing, like usually trying to kind of silently leave usually is kind of like the easy way when you make a big deal out of it, even if it's like justified in terms of like that you call them out and all that. Most likely you will get more there are more consequences to that you may get back, and sometimes it can really be years. I mean, we now also feel a bit more resistance because we're successful, and
Yeah.
and that's something I think that people should bear in mind, that even after 5 years or 10 years they can just be like, oh, I didn't even think of them in years, right? And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden they're kind of in your face and they're like, oh, they're not over it yet.
Yeah, our school exists now for about 5.5 years
Yeah.
for
It is
context.
kind of like an ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend kinda thing. It's like, "Psh, I wasn't even thinking about you." Yeah, I wanted to you guys mentioned something that triggered a thought for me, which was the idea of, having to know everything, and I think, I forgot what podcast or clip or YouTube video I saw this on, but they were talking about imposter syndrome
Mhm.
and how the likelihood of your imposter syndrome will go up as the more knowledge you acquire, the more success you acquire. And I definitely feel that as a black belt now. I'm like, I don't know crap. Obviously I know a few things. It took me a while to get here, but that idea of like really trying to hold on to being at least it's for show, having a certain level of skill set or a certain knowledge level can really create toxicity within your gym. And I did have a great conversation with Caleb Kahn. He is an owner of a gym I train out of. It's called Steadfast. And just really having an open discussion about allowing yourself to learn, like you guys were saying, from the kids, from white belts, from blue, from people of all skill levels, because that collaboration is how we grow, and even as black belts. So if we are able to kind of take out that smoke and mirrors like in the Wizard of Oz, don't look at the man behind the curtain, like really we're there's things that black belts can still learn from, not just from other black belts, but from their students.
Yeah, I think sometimes there are people they're like now blue belts or purple belts, and they're just so specialized in a specific thing
Mhm.
that they are sometimes better than a black belt at that specific topic. Where I'm like, obviously you can learn from them, and I think that's also completely fine. I think like what I've also noticed in people in general, as you say, is that also when they get higher ranked, that they get more insecure. So like I also know
Mhm.
people that competed at white and blue, but then did not anymore, and they got their purple and they got their brown, and they don't dare to compete anymore because they're so afraid that they will lose, or even lose then from lower ranks. And so there is a lot where I also find that as a coach, we really talk a lot also with our students about these things, like that if you have a highly successful blue belt in tournament, yeah, they may be able to have a purple belt or maybe a brown belt. It does it more recreational or all of this. Like I think context is just also very important, and in the end, also like
It's also a jiu-jitsu that we play in the gym for fun and for growth and for learning. It's a total different skill than performing at a tournament. It's not necessarily the same.
now we also have different type of classes because it's a mindset difference.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and what I wanted to say with that is I think that putting our black belts and our leaders on this
Mhm.
pedestal that they know everything really sets people up to be in this cult-like environment where you really surrender a lot of your normal thought and your critical thinking, like you were saying, to someone else. Is really that black belt doesn't know everything. I
Yeah,
mean, we're here to learn and to guide and to help and to assist people on their own journey and path, and not make people be clones of ourselves.
Yeah,
yeah.
especially if you would meet them on the road, not knowing that they have a black belt.
Mhm.
If they do something, you would tell them off too. Like I remember, I was a white belt, and we had another black belt was coming over for a seminar, and it was very hot. It was in summer, and it was a very very long seminar. And my partner and I, we were really doing our best, but we started to get headache because we were getting dehydrated. So we just got up to get a sip of water so that we could train hard again. So as we weren't like chatting and just like, doing nothing. No, we just straight went, get us a water, get back, because we were really inspired and we wanted, but we just both got just a bit slower. And then we got yelled at by the coach saying that we shouldn't be lazy, like, who do we think we are? Go back to training, all that. So my partner just she just like got tears, and she just left and went to the locker room, because we were really working really hard. Like, we were not lazy, and it was so unfair. So I went to this black belt and I said, you made her cry. Why? Because we have been very focused. We just realized that we were losing focus, and and because we want to also do your seminar justice and learn as much from you as we can, we took a sip of water. And so I was like, I find this is not okay. He's like, no. I think I found disrespectful. It's like, no, I was not disrespectful, and this and that. I was like, yes, you were. And I could just see the disbelief, the cognitive dissonance in his face, that I dared, as a tiny white belt, to just tell him off. I said, she's crying right now. And he stayed for a few days, and it was interesting because the other days he thought I would be like this super mean. This was the next thing, but then because I told him off, I have to be like this mean bitch if I just may say the word, right? But then he realized that I was just normal, just respectful to him. But I remember that he was totally shocked that I just dared to just say, like, yeah, this behavior is not okay. And I'm like,
I think, go ahead, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, also on the street, like, anybody, like, if you wouldn't accept this in any other life situation, why would you accept this on the mats?
Exactly. And so, speaking of which, you've been having a really great conversation in regards to a female, I think it was a Muay Thai fight, where her coach was like really strongly physically manhandling her. And you said this exact same thing. I remember I had an experience with somebody kind of like kind of pat me in the stomach, and I just kind of looked at him like, you're crazy. It never happened again. But I would never allow somebody to touch me like that, even as a coach. That's not okay. That's me personally. I don't know what her experience with her coach is. I know she's defending him, but like that level of boundary stepping in order to get success is like I'm not sure if people realizing how that's going to affect them long term. So sure, might be able to win the fight right now. She might be able to win many fights from that day on. But what is it going to do to that person long term? A lot of people, I think, in the comment section aren't really thinking about this. They're thinking about the short-term success in terms of this fight that she's going to win, the next 10 fights she's going to win, the amount of fights she's going to win for her career. But let's look at athletes after their career is over. How many of them are on drugs? How many of them died from the injuries that they've had? Like, we need to start to step outside of short-term success, not just because her coach is getting her to perform as an athlete, but what it's doing to her as a person. There's so many athletes going to therapy because they're having performance anxiety, because they're trying to perform for their coach. She might be able to perform, but how is she being as a person? They're two different things.
Yeah, I think that case is very interesting because as a fighter, I mean, with jiu-jitsu, I usually am like, we have matches, there's no, apart from combative jiu-jitsu, so, you're a fighter, so you're kind of supposed to be badass, right? Especially also when you're at the top. So I can see that it's super hard to be like, when you admit, so to speak, that you're being abused by your coach, because it also shows that somehow you're not strong enough as a fighter to maintain boundaries. I think there's this weird paradox there, that on the one hand, you feel you have to toughen it out, because otherwise, as they also use as their one of their arguments, that, if you cannot handle beating from your coach, then you're not cut out for the sport. But I'm like, wait a minute, because especially I spoke with several women who also are fighting in that exact promotion, whose coaches do not do this, and they are also, or maybe even more, successful. So just thinking that, having to tolerate a coach that physically and mentally abuses you, it's not a prerequisite to becoming a champion. You can also become a champion without all that. And that's exactly also what you say. Like, what's the long-term thing? When you believe that that is part of it, I don't think that is part of it at all. You can train hard without a coach adding on top of it, adding more pressure that you feel like forcing you in a fixed mindset, even because when you feel like that when you lose or you don't perform well, that you let down your coach, your team, and all that, you're forced in a fixed mindset. What you want is to be in a growth mindset, that even if you don't perform so well, okay, maybe the weight cut wasn't so good, you didn't have as much energy as normally, or whatever, then you're like, okay, next time I need to do this and this and this better. That's growth mindset. That's how you need in the long term, most likely will perform better and better. Being hit in the face or held in the throat is not a part of that. It's not necessary.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much. I strayed from competing in jiu-jitsu, mostly because I was experiencing injuries and I just couldn't perform as a jiu-jitsu athlete at that time. So I diverged and started doing bodybuilding, and I was really looking for a different type of coach, someone who was really helping me develop holistically as an athlete, mind, body, spirit, and not just, especially in bodybuilding, you can really fall deeply into a cult mindset and cut ridiculous amount of carbs, and it could just be crazy, and then have this really toxic energy about you. And so I actually found a really great coach. Her name's Shanae Momoko. She helped me a lot on my limiting beliefs and helped me, especially as a woman, it can be weird going from like a male dominated sport and then going into something where you get to really release your female energy. And I felt that imposter syndrome, like, what am I doing in a sparkling bikini walking on stage? This is weird. you know but she helped me through a lot of those childhood traumas that I was experiencing. Anyways, long story short, I digress, because I got into NLP, and I did the training with her. uh, Something that we learn in NLP, for those that you don't know, NLP stands for neuro linguistic programming. In short, definition of it, it's the lost manuscript of the mind. It really helps you understand your subconscious and your emotions and how they end up forming the actions and the behaviors and the beliefs that you have. And something that we learned in NLP, well, there's always a dark side to the force, right? So there's people out there who use hypnotic language patterns, who use a lot of NLP tactics to break people down and become and create these cult-like environments. And it can be really scary because they're very good at sleight of tongue, right? And so in NLP, we learn about a lot about working with people in an ecological way that really is for them and on their terms, and not, it's not for me, and I'm not trying to guide somebody to get results outside of their own mental health and well-being. But we did learn how actual brainwashing works. And I thought of this as a former Navy veteran, and based off of NLP, not any other, you're a PhD specialist and you understand neurobiology. So not based off of that school of thought, but really based off of how NLP works and how brainwashing working that way. Really works by cutting off human resources, what people need. At a young level, it's easier because people have less critical thinking or critical faculty. That line between their subconscious mind and their conscious mind is a lot grayer, it's thinner. But as you become adults, we strengthen our critical faculty to thinking, okay, this is not right. This is against my belief system. I'm not going to do that. But when you start to take people's basic human needs away, sleep, food, connection to social life, that begins to, you start to break people down. So when you're in sports and when you are a martial artist, we have to realize that we are highly susceptible to brainwashing. Because when you're training a lot, especially for a competition, guess what goes down? Your sleep. Okay. Well, if you're training a lot, guess what also goes down? Your connection to your social groups. And then also, if you're cutting weight and you're dependent on your coach to tell you what weight class you're supposed to be at, they now become the owner of your resources for food and water, right? And that just makes you so much more susceptible to brainwashing, because now your coach or whoever's doing the brainwashing or having the narcissistic traits are the owner of the things that you actually need to live as a human being. So that's why I really wanted to make this information known, is because, and here I am. This is when I was super, super tiny. It was crazy. I'm currently like 180. And in these photos, usually before bodybuilding, I would fall around like 140, maybe 150s. But for this show, I went all the way down to like 127 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. So the bounce back for me since the show has been huge, but I would also say I put on some muscle mass since the show as well. I put on fat too because I'm not that lean anymore, but I also put on some muscle mass. But yeah, it when you sit and think about it, when I was in the military and I learned this, I was like, this is exactly what they did to us when in basic, right? They're waking us up at all hours of the night. We can no longer sleep. We can't get food unless they tell us to go to the galley, and then they limit our time to eat. We can't shower. We can only shower for about 5 minutes, then we have to go out. And we're completely disconnected from our families. We can only call them when they want us to call. So, not against being in the military, but that's pretty much all what basic is about. This whole podcast might get censored. Maybe I take it out. I don't know. But yeah.
But in the context of military, that also makes sense. But in the context of a PJ school where let's face it, it's only a fraction that competes. Most people just come there for hobby, relaxation, fun, all of that. So it's not a military. It's not a war zone. It's something where people want to connect. Whether such practices are good or bad in the military is a whole completely different ethical type of conversation, right? Because you need soldiers. They need to be well equipped, because God knows what you guys will all face. So that's a whole different thing. But obviously, a jiu-jitsu school
in the field, it's of course a risk when you question the command. Like,
yes,
in the field during I was firefighter. That's not quite as military, but during when we did exercise or actual alarm, there was no questioning. You had to execute whatever orders you got, as long as they were not against basically human rights or getting yourself in danger. You had to execute. When you disagreed, there was afterwards time to discuss, right? But it's like you need to kind of make sure that people obey the command. So this kind of training might make sense. But
it's life and death in those situations.
It's life and death. Jiu-Jitsu is not life and death. And I also question so often there is water breaks in classes, but when you want to drink outside of that water breaks, you're shouted at. I'm like, why? Because even between rounds, between fights, between whatever, you can drink. You can make sure you're hydrated. You cannot really perform when you're dehydrated. Also, your mental capacity goes down. Your risk for injury goes up. So why do you control the water intake, right? You might tell people, hey, maybe you don't want to drink as much, because when your belly is full, that might not be fun. But it's why do you control, for example, water intake? And I would ask every coach, like, why, and see how they react. It's also how to discover a cult. Ask the coach, why am I not allowed to drink outside of the water breaks, and see their answer. Maybe there is a good one.
In general, asking questions is a very good way to figure out whether you're in a cult or not. Because if you have a coach that just does it because that's how their coach did it, and I don't know, that is also something, like asking how they see sexual harassment or assault in the gym. There are many topics that you can just ask, like their opinion, or how would you handle it? Like, hey, say what happens in fight sports, say it would happen here. How would you handle it? I think these kind of questions, and some as simple as like with water, like why can you, because for instance now in Germany it's super hot, so I tell them also when I forget a drinking break, just if you need to zip, go for it, because they also don't go away and chat, and they don't know, they just take a sip of water and they come back, so it also doesn't really disrupt anything. And that comes, I think, also a bit back to this ecological approach, which really your thing. Also, like you train the person in front of you, but also that you want to figure out what works for them. How do they learn optimally? And you want to create this space where you can do that.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a fine line with having a firm hand, because you will, any coach will, and I definitely know I do. I'll have these students who are kind of moping around, dragging their feet, or just kind of like flailing about if they're being a training partner, and you have to get a little more firm with them. And I try
Agreed.
my best to be good with that, because you can't, when we're having this discussion for the audience, we're not trying to condone babying at all.
No,
That's not
no.
what this is about. This is about overstepping boundaries, really.
It's a difference whether somebody during a sparring round steps out to drink and takes a minute of training time from the other person away, for example.
If it's mid-round.
If it's mid-round, like I also don't allow water breaks mid-round. But when there's a partner change, when there's this...
I mean, I have to cut in though, like if a woman or somebody else has like a trigger or something mid-round, obviously, or a panic attack, obviously they can drink some water. I mean,
it's a different...
I know.
Situational.
It's situational, but obviously we definitely have very clear boundaries. And because, like, just a very simple example. Yesterday we had this summer party, and we had like this huge water balloon fight with the kids, and we said, okay, we do this, but afterwards we all have to clean up. We have to collect all of the pieces of the balloons that exploded. Otherwise, we're not going to play. So after it was done, they also all did it without question. And that's just like, because there is firm boundaries. And yes, with some others, if they don't want, okay, then next year they cannot participate, where they're very, very clear.
It's
but other than that,
with kids classes, for example, I also don't usually allow them to drink outside of the breaks, just because it disrupts the class too much. But there we also have more often water breaks. But there's the reason for the flow of the class, and that the kids don't they don't come back as quickly, and
there are logistical reasons that are not tied with control. I think that is the thing. Like when you want to control it, then that should be questioned. But if it's like just to keep the flow going, and as long as everybody can have their moments, then I think there's not a problem. And there was some other thing that I also wanted to say a few times regarding brainwashing. I have heard often people say that, so they start jiu-jitsu, they get hooked at jiu-jitsu, or maybe you could say addicted to jiu-jitsu. So all they do is jiu-jitsu, and they start losing friends that are not training. I often hear this narrative that people lost good friends also. And sometimes they even are like, yeah, well, this is my family now, or, jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, no, I think you're missing out, because you need like these resources, these outside resources also thing. Like when you start losing people that are not in your school, it is a sign that also maybe maybe you're a bit too obsessed, or maybe a bit too into it, because of course, love jiu-jitsu or whatever it is that you do, but keep an eye out also that it's not the only thing in the world. And I think that when I said some things to my friends that were not in jiu-jitsu, and they were like, "You accept that?" At first, I felt super defensive, but then I thought, why do I feel so defensive? That on its own is also already a red flag. So if you are in a situation and you just say something to somebody who has no reason to hate on jiu-jitsu or anything, and you just say something, and they're like, really, that's odd, and you feel immediately defensive, that's already also a sign that something is up. Or when you start losing many friends outside of jiu-jitsu, ask yourself why, because it's odd.
That's Tirza for me. She's my checks and balances. She remembers when I was like, you should do jujitsu, you should do jujitsu. She's like, no. But I think, and she would tell me, dude, you're talking about jujitsu way too much. Yeah. I'm not sure if you guys can hear. She's like, So yeah, she's definitely her. And I have like two good friends. I don't have a lot of great, like close friends. I have a lot of friends, like a lot of great friends, but my close friends are girls who are outside of jiu-jitsu, help me be a real person again, because it's really important.
Yeah.
And especially like me, I think you too, Laurien, you said you're like a lot of the times the only female in the group. And I think a lot of women who train know that. And I was around like a really guy gym, and and they really want me to feel like one of the boys. And I just like, I really would just want to be a girl. I need my girl time. Please give me my girlfriend. And so like just being around Tirza, she's the main one who checks me, to be honest with you. If it's not Daniel, it's actually mostly my mom and Tirza checking me, keeping me like real.
But it's so important because you have that. So now imagine you would be under a coach that tries to separate you from these checks and balances. That is like where that's where many are at, and that's when it can go really bad soon. And I think that is there they are, the checks and balances.
Yes.
And I think that is. So I think there's just a few stages. So let's say you're new to jiu-jitsu and everything is just awesome because it's new, it's exciting, it's thrilling, and I think, and then, yeah, of course, I know many that all of a sudden they start 2 times a week and all of a sudden they're there every day. It's very common. And other relationships will suffer from that. And I think it's also important to note that if you just sit out every now and then, like at a class, like this fear of missing out, like who cares? Like 1 or 2 classes a week that you miss or so, that's not gonna set you back, or that your training partner is gonna surpass you all of a sudden. Like that takes a little bit more than a few classes. I remember that my academia friends then were like, oh, let's have some drinks and blah blah. And at first I was like, yeah, but I want to go to training. But then I felt, okay, let's go. And I felt really bad. Then I thought, why?
That's another red flag when your coach wants you to train all the time hard, like go hard or go home.
Also when you're injured.
When they want you there every day, all the time, like they pressure you into coming more and more and more. Also a red flag. There is a difference between encouraging to have a good training schedule and train a lot, especially when you have the goal to compete, that you want to train more, obviously, but when that's prioritized over recovery and injury prevention, there's also something wrong. Like, of course, when you're injured, you can come in, you can watch the class, you can still learn some things you might be able to do. Of course, very welcome to come. But don't train at all cost. Don't train past exhaustion. Don't train past injury. And when there is push, really question that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but have you guys heard, Laurien, there's have you ever heard of the thought model? It's called the model sometimes.
Not sure that I have.
But it's basically a process that people go through where they can, I guess, change behavior if you want to on a conscious level, like by looking at your subconscious, kind of similar to CBT. I think so, but I don't want to say that that's what it is. But basically, it's a process to change behavior on the conscious level by looking at your subconscious thought patterns. Yes, exactly. So thank you, Tirza, for bringing it up. So the first part, we're going to do like a little game, and I actually wrote up these lists and on limiting beliefs that a lot of people have, not necessarily that get them into cults or toxic behaviors, but they can just be a limiting belief that's holding them back. And I thought it would probably be important for this podcast because I'm sure a lot of people in jujitsu, in the world, relate to a lot of these limiting beliefs. And if we're aware of them, then it can make us less susceptible to entering in toxic relationships. So what I wanted to do with this game is I'm going to uh, list out a circumstance and observation, and I'll give you my NLP background assessment of what the thought and the belief could be. And then you can give me your neurobiology background on what the thought and the belief can be and some potential human motivations behind it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the first one is the circumstance. And just with this game, you guys, when we're going through the model or the thought model, our circumstances are always neutral. It's usually our thoughts around these circumstances that will make them positive or negative. Now, in these concepts, in this context, pretty much all the circumstances are negative. So we'll just take that. I just want you guys to know that. But usually you can apply this to an issue that you're having in your life that you're maybe stressed about, and just really frame it that the circumstance is neutral, and it's really our thoughts and our beliefs around those circumstances that make it either positive or negative. Okay, so the first one is the circumstances somebody witnessed or experienced abusive behavior, physical or verbal. Now, something that you may be thinking if you've witnessed this or that was the circumstances, that this person really cares about me. And the motivation that you have behind that thought could be love, or seeking the need to be cared for. What thoughts come up for you, Laurien?
When I would witness abuse, I of course would immediately question why. I mean, if it's it depends a little bit on the context, whether it's let's say it's the martial arts world. Immediately, my thought would be like, okay, this is not okay, unacceptable. Do you want me to continue, or do we first go through the whole?
Yeah, you can go through. Just let's just stay with this one, and we'll go continue to the next one.
Yeah. So thought would be like, what the hell? This is not okay. Feeling would be like, depending, like disgust, but also maybe fear. Is this person okay? That. And then we had action. So in my case, I would check on that person. If it's also like, if it's in my school, whatever, I would speak to this other person, see what I can do to help. Results, well, don't know, because that depends also on the person who is being abused, what they want, how, so that I cannot really talk about the result. But that's how, if I would witness it, like with this, what went viral, that's what I would, if I would be able to go there, that's what I most likely would do. In neurobiological thing, is one thing, like, if you are okay with being hit, the question is like, is that because you feel you're worthless, that it's therefore you deserve to be punished? Is this because maybe at home you got physically abused, that you therefore think it's also okay in a martial arts setting because it's familiar? I think there are many questions, like just the act that somebody punched you and you're okay with that, and it's not that you are entering a ring where there's going to be punches, but kind of outside of that, the question is like, why do you think it's okay when somebody hits you?
Yes, this is good. All right, so next one is and for that context, I also put this person could be lacking boundaries. So really going through what Lauren just said is really questioning your thought patterns is going to help you overcome that barrier. The next one is going to be around being loyal to a brand or image. Before we get into that, there's something that you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast about why you refer to your team as a team and not a family. Go ahead. I want to hear you say it.
Well, the family you don't choose. You have the family, and there are so many examples of toxic families and dysfunctional families, and in that sense the analogy is quite fitting, because there are so many toxic gyms, so many dysfunctional gyms, so we choose our gym, and we want it to be a place of growth and of collaboration, and
instead of family ties, where there's also a power imbalance.
There's power imbalance. There are hierarchies, and often, in families, there you cannot, or there is punishment when you disobey, or there
if it's a dysfunctional family.
If it's dysfunctional. And that is basically analogies we don't want.
Yeah, because also in families, like my brother and I, we hit each other really hard, way harder than I would hit my friends. Like it's like this. We see it in our school too. Like we have also some siblings, and I mean they roll a lot harder than they do with others, right? So I mean, there's not to be negative about families, but I find that for a marketing thing, I find it's very very tricky, because I mean, like if I would stop paying right now. So say, Vaughn, you say, oh, we're family, and I come to your school, but I stop paying, but I'm family, right? Am I?
Yeah.
It's like
you're family as long as you pay, and that's not like
for instance. And I think it's problematic because like look, there is a power imbalance in every school, in that we are the head coaches. However, just because we may or may not know more about jiu-jitsu than our students doesn't mean we know more than them on every level.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Like, that is this thing. So the same when you go to school, like my professor in ancient history, he obviously knew more than me about these topics, but it didn't mean that, so there was a power imbalance, but it doesn't mean that he therefore is a better person or knows more than me. But we also didn't have a father-daughter kind of relationship. He was just a teacher. And I think what I like so much about team is like it's teamwork. Like success is rarely a one-person game, even in martial arts when it's maybe just you against another, but the whole preparation behind it to get you on that mat or in the ring or in the cage, that's team effort, that's collaboration, that is all kinds of people helping you, training with you, coaching you. And for us, we work together so that we all grow, and that's why we call it a team and stay far away from these family metaphors.
I love that. That's really good. That's really good. So, with you guys keeping that in mind, whoever is experiencing this circumstance, I hope that helps you. Okay. So, this person probably witnessed, so the circumstance is the person witnessed people getting kicked out of the gym for training elsewhere or speaking up against abusive behavior. They start to think, I am a loyal person, I value loyalty. And maybe their basic human motivation is they're just trying to belong and be part of a community. What advice would you give to them as a neurobiologist?
Well, the question is why, where does this loyalty come from? Where does this need for belonging come from? And is this loyalty really going both ways? Because this loyalty demand, like you're only allowed to train at this one team so that you can belong, is very restrictive. So can you also, as like, I'm a bit stuck in my phrasing it.
I would just like, when you feel somehow you're better because you stay, because you're loyal, think about why that is. Like there is also this this kind of movie called The Wave, where a teacher he creates the wave to explain how fascism worked. And it completely goes out of hand in the classroom. So also the kids that normally are bullied, they are now belonging somewhere, and they are actually becoming the most aggressive in trying to keep that very pure and all that. So I can definitely recommend people watching The Wave. It doesn't take that long. I think when you feel somehow that you are like that you feel immediately defensive or hurt when somebody leaves or gets kicked out or something, that would be something. And I think from a neurobiology, let's then really dive a bit deeper in. So in the brain, we have something we call microglia. They do what the blood cells do in our body to keep things kind of healthy. So they take things away that are like, that needs to be destroyed, but they also replenish. Microglia are like the housekeepers in our brain. So they keep our neural connections fine. But also when we don't use specific connections, and doesn't mean not using at all, can just mean using slightly less, often they get deleted, so to speak. They get taken away, thrown in the trash. When you realize that in a cultic gym, or you see like this, and these integrations are already kind of separate, you're not firing those neural connections, which means that they get also weaker. Same with muscle. Like when you want to create muscle, you have to work with that muscle. When you don't, you will lose it. And that's the same in the brain. So then the microglia, they will then prune it away. So these connections become even less strong, which means that for them to even think this advice we give them to think and challenge themselves, maybe also first at the first stage before challenging the rest, becomes very hard, because that's what you don't use. When you don't use it, you lose it. And that's the exact same for the muscles. It's also the same in our brain. So I really think the first step is like, why do I feel that I am so great because I'm loyal? Why do I feel maybe a bit superior? Why do I feel need to think negatively about the people that left?
Yeah, how far does the loyalty of the rest of the team and of the coach goes to me? Because how big is the step that I need to make, that I'm getting thrown out? Like
That could be another one,
what are things that I would like to do that I can't do because otherwise I will be thrown out? And is that worth
outcome?
What's the outcome when maybe I'm on holiday and I want to train at a friend's gym? Will I then be also thrown out? Just because I want to roll with a friend?
Yeah.
Like when I stop paying, will the coach still be loyal, right? When I maybe I have some financial trouble, am I still allowed to train, or am I then also kicked out? Like, are they loyal to me back? To which extent? Because
it's a two-way street.
Yeah, loyalty is a two-way street, and just because like there is this demand of loyalty that you need to fulfill, but in which way are they loyal back?
Amazing. Good. Okay, next one. This willingness to do anything for success. So this person is enduring verbal or social punishment one would not normally endure under any circumstance. They might start to believe I am only valued by how successful I am. That's their belief system, is that they feel that they're only valued by how successful they are. And again, their basic human motivation could be belonging and becoming a valued member of the community. What advice would you guys give to them?
That they should explore their fixed mindset and see how they can transform it into a growth mindset. So if you think you only mean something, or it's when you are successful, you perform well, that means that you directly connect your achievements, your success, to your whole being. But there are two completely different things. Because maybe you lose, happens, everybody loses, every now and then, also the greats. Does it there, like, let's say, at the Polaris, Cesare Matuda, she competed against Michelle Nicolini and she armbarred Michelle Nicolini within 10 seconds.
Mhm.
Michelle Nicolini was already a black belt before Cesare started training jiu-jitsu. Now, that she armbarred Michelle Nicolini in 10 seconds, does it mean that Michelle Nicolini is not a true black belt? Does it mean that all the other outcomes Michelle Nicolini had already at that time, does it mean that they don't mean anything? Does it mean, therefore, that she should hand in her black belt? I don't think so. And I think that it is, and that says nothing about Michelle as a person. She just got caught, or she had the off day, or there can be many reasons. And I think that thinking that I think it's important. The growth mindset means that you look at the process, at the effort you put into it, and not at the results. When you stare blindly to the results, you will always hate yourself, because you create a game you cannot win, because there's always the chance that you may lose, or you may get injured so you can't even compete, or whatever, something comes in the way. Whereas when you focus on the effort you put into it that leads up to a performance, when you know that you gave everything and all that, and you realize, okay, that I can tweak a little bit, every time you get closer to that, when you know it's the effort was right, then you may not win, but you also didn't fail either.
Also, when you tie your being successful to winning, as in this case, being successful means winning, you actually tie your self-worth to a outcome that you can't control, because you cannot control whether you win or lose. You can control your preparation. You can control your performance, in the sense that you
food, recovery, sleep.
When you're there, you're in a moment, you give it your all. But for that you need to build also confidence, and you cannot build confidence when you focus on I need to win to be someone.
Be already somebody. It's like what there's this, I forgot the person who this so you have do
be do have.
And then the other way around. So some people, like this example operates like, I first need to be a champion before I can have like I have to say the other way around, whatever. But so before I can feel great about myself, I first need to win this tournament, or get this million in, or whatever it is, or lose 10 pounds, whatever. And only when I
next belt,
so only when I accomplish that, then I can be proud of myself, or I can feel like I accomplished something. If you do that, you typically set yourself up for failure, because you play a game that's very hard. And oftentimes, even when you lose these 10 pounds or you do win it, you don't really feel like you're then also sometimes imposter syndrome kicks in. So that's not the answer either. Whereas when you turn around, when you ask yourself the question, who do I get to be? Kind of like, so what kind of person do I need to be to become a champion, and be that already before you get there? So that would be like, oh, in our case, we're going to go to the Worlds this year. So who do I get to be to, say, perform well at the Worlds? Well, that means that I get to prepare. So we get privates in, we work on our jiu-jitsu, we work on the holes we have good nutrition, recovery, additional workouts, lifting, whatever. That are the things that, so like doing that, I feel I am prepared. I'm putting in the effort, the work, that when I go there, I can give a good performance, because I also want to have good fights and also give my opponents a good, a good challenge. When you behave like that, that is when like, win or lose, whether I make the podium or not, I know that I gave it my all, and that is what counts.
Mm-hmm. Yes. My coach used to say, who are you being? Exact. And operating that way helps you release your attachment to having the thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the do part is like the process of how you get there after you've discovered who you need to be to get to the things you want to attain.
Yeah, I said
Okay,
it
last one.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
All good.
We have a little bit of lag here. Okay, last one. Okay, so seeking approval or validation. I know there's people out there who really struggle with a lot of people pleasing, so this one might be helpful for you. Okay, the circumstances might be being a people pleaser and struggling to say no or set boundaries, and having a compulsive need to perform acts or endure punishment without regard for oneself. So really, I really want to emphasize a compulsive need to
Yeah.
do things for others.
The
And
the
maybe
thing
you're
is,
thinking, I'm not good enough.
the thing is whenever you say yes to something, then you say also no to something else.
Mhm.
So it's very important to think about when you want to please people, and you say always yes to them to do what they ask you. You say also no to other things that are also important, because your resources, your time, your that you have is limited, which means you might say no to self-care, recovery, sleep, which also in the end means you cannot fulfill everything you say yes to, or at which cost you can. So it's way healthier to set proper boundaries where you say or think about whenever you say yes to something, what are you saying no to, and can you afford that? So that you maybe can add a step in between.
I think on a deeper level, it's like, why do you feel the need to please? Because what do you get out of it? Okay, there is this funny kind of questionnaire also from Nicole Gover, I believe. It's like where you figure out like what are your needs and how do you satisfy them. So let's say I feel need to connect socially, and my action to do so is to scroll Instagram. Okay, I may get the kick out of feeling somehow connected, but obviously there are healthier ways. I can maybe hang out with a friend, or maybe I do an activity with somebody, or I go to Jiu Jitsu, right? It's also a social event that is way healthier. And what this questionnaire does is like kind of figure out what is your needs and how do you satisfy them. So let's say that you feel that when people need you, that gives value to your life. It's an external thing, and how do you satisfy that need? By doing the bidding of people, even if you kind of know like, okay, they take advantage of me. Um, the question is that like, what other actions, what other things can you do that satisfies that need to be needed in a healthy way, where you do not sacrifice so much, or maybe even sacrificing your dignity for that. I find it is good to serve people, but you're not their servant. Like in our school, I also always say that obviously we serve because we're kind of customer service, because we teach something. Having said so, I am not their servant. And I think it is always good to first figure out what needs do I have, what is important to me. Is it connection? Is it love? Is it trust? Is it whatever, anything? There's a whole list. Do I need freedom? And it's like, how do I satisfy those? And then the next step is, are these healthy ways or are these toxic ways? Without judging yourself. It's not about, give yourself grace, because for me it was scrolling where I was like, okay, that I can really do better. And then you just figure out like, okay, so what can I do instead? And that's, I think, a pretty neutral way to figuring that out without judging yourself, and also figuring out ways how you can satisfy that need yourself, so you're not dependent on external factor to feel that you are valuable, that you are also important.
Mm, mm, mm. Beautiful. Amazing. Well, thank you guys again for coming on. This is wonderful advice. I feel like I'm just like soaking in all of the knowledge right now and all of your beautiful energy too. Is there any last thoughts that you have before we end the show?
If any of the listeners is like, I'm not sure, or I maybe, feel free to reach out, because I think you're not alone. And sometimes the first step to, whether you were in a cult gym or you're like, oh, I struggle with this, I think being talk about it, to make it something tangible, is like the first step. So for us, we're always open and to talk. That feel free, you're invited.
Also, if you want to cross train and step by, you're very welcome to come to Munich. Yeah. And for the rest, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. We learned a lot as well.
Yeah, it was really cool to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Wonderful. Oh, and we cannot let you guys go without telling people how they can find you. I know we just put Off the Zone on the screen, which is your more personal growth and awareness channel, but you guys also have a gym, and I want people to know how to find you if they are in the Munich area.
So we have an Instagram account, this Team Laurien and Alex. We have also a website with the same name. So when you would Google, usually Team Alex, it's easier than my name. You already find us.
Munich, yeah.
Yeah, Team Alex Munich, then you will sure to find us.
Wonderful. Beautiful, you guys. Well, thank you again. We will stay in touch, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you for watching. You can watch more videos like this one by clicking these links.